Tonight, 1,000 days of war.
Despite the fact that the war continues, and despite the consequences in the city and in Ukraine in general, we try to hold on.
How the Ukrainian people are dealing with Russia's deadly invasion. Plus,
border security was a core issue of the Trump campaign. Families are worried about threats from the Trump administration.
Concerns rise as the president-elect promises to use the military for mass deportations. And the latest additions to the Trump transition team. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation.
"1,000 days of war, destruction, and resilience in Ukraine." Good evening. I'm John Jessup.
And from the CBN studio in Washington, I'm Jenna Browder. Tonight, the grim milestone marking Russia's full-scale war comes with a new warning from Moscow. Vladimir Putin invoking a new reason to use nuclear weapons.
The announcement to lower the threshold for nukes follows President Biden's call for allowing Ukraine to fire long-range U.S. missiles into Russia. CBN Washington correspondent Michelle London joins us now with more of today's tit for tat. Michelle.
Well, John, Ukraine fired 6 of those missiles for the first time today as President Volodymyr Zelensky told the European Union now is the time to bring Russia to the negotiating table.
Tuesday, a Kremlin spokesperson stated any massive aerial attack on Russia could trigger a nuclear response.
So that is a worry. That is a worry for NATO countries, a worry for Ukraine.
Putin's change in nuclear doctrine comes hours after the Russian Defense Ministry claims it shot down 5 of 6 missiles fired by Ukraine into the country. Those U.S. ballistic missiles authorized 2 days ago by President Biden.
Together we have accomplished much, but we must not fear doing even more.
Amid Tuesday's escalation, Zelensky addressed members of the European Parliament with a message of unity before urging a ceasefire negotiation.
If we could stop Europe's way of life from falling down, we can surely push Russia towards a just peace.
The State Department says Russia's using 10,000 North Korean soldiers in the war triggered Biden's decision on Ukraine using the long-range missiles, as Russian drone strikes near a hospital killed at least 12 people, including a child, according to the Ukrainian authorities. After nearly 3 years of terror, suffering, and unimaginable loss, still no signs of a peaceful ending.
Given North Korea has formed an alliance with Russia, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte says Western countries will likely send further aid and money to Ukraine. John, Jenna.
Michelle, is President Zelensky showing confidence in his military's size and weapons capacity if this war does continue into next year?
That's a good question. Zelensky says that his military plans to reduce dependence on Western military support next year. Ukraine plans to produce at least 30,000 long-range drones and manufacture 3,000 long-range missiles. John, Jenna.
All right, Michelle London, thank you very much. Well, while the war in Ukraine escalates, Washington could be days away from securing a ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah.
U.S. Special Envoy Amos Hochstein in Lebanon today saying a ceasefire is within reach. Hezbollah initially responded positively to a draft proposal to end the war.
We have continued to narrow the gaps through the discussions over the last few weeks, and specifically today we continued to significantly narrow the gaps. So the meeting was very constructive and very helpful.
The U.S. brokered deal would remove IDF troops from Lebanon and push Hezbollah away from Israel's border. Lebanese troops and UN peacekeepers would also be sent to fill a buffer zone. Israel says it will target Hezbollah until its citizens can return to their homes in the north. Meanwhile, the terror group is firing daily rockets, barrages into Israeli cities. Here in Washington, China in the spotlight again, as a new bipartisan report lays out how Beijing is expanding its economic and military influence around the world. That includes factors like supporting Iran and Russia and investing in powerful new technologies like AI.
Behind China's self-declared quest for quote-unquote globalization and multipolarization, it is a desire to ensure its own dominance. The leadership in Beijing is prepared to leverage persuasion, manipulation, and coercion in order to advance its own agenda.
The report gives Congress several recommendations, including banning the import of certain Chinese goods and investing in AI.
Now is Tony Perkins, president of the Family Research Council and host of Washington Watch. Tony, welcome to you. So today's hearing focused specifically on Chinese threats to national security, trade, and geopolitics, but we know there are other issues concerning China. Tony, how is China threatening religious freedom as well?
Well, John, one of the things they're doing, they're exporting repression. The technology is being used to surveil and to repress the freedom of speech and freedom of religion. And this is being, this type of technology is being shared with other tyrannical, repressive governments. There's another aspect to this when you look at the economic. The Biden administration, the Democratic administrations that have been promoting abortion, LGBTQ policies, especially in the African continent, these countries are pushing back on that, and our foreign policy dollars, our foreign aid is often tied to those policies. And so this is an open door for China to come in. Because they don't have, initially, they don't have those strings attached to the investment they're making in these countries. So I'm very hopeful that the Trump administration that was tough on China in the first term will do so again and hold them in check when it comes to exporting this technology that is repressive toward religious freedom.
Tony, talk about some of the ways the United States and other Western countries can hold China to account for abusing religious freedom rights.
Well, Jenna, I mean, one, I think the incoming administration is not going to be, gratuitously getting involved in the business of other countries, but when it does begin to export or the technology is being utilized and we are doing business with those same firms for other purposes, we can stop that. We also need to, as consumers, understand that when we are buying products, and it's hard to find products not made in China, when we're buying those products, we are facilitating the growth of that industry that is, at the same time, repressing the freedom of speech, the freedom of religion, and political participation. So, again, hopeful that this incoming administration will hold them at bay and check, especially as they are exporting this technology to affect religious freedom in other countries.
Tony, how would you advise the incoming Trump administration on some of the policies towards China? I know you just expressed being hopeful, but maybe what are some suggestions you would offer?
Well, what we saw with Mike Pompeo, Secretary of State in the last administration on the way out, he made very clear, and he got tough with China. And I think, number one, we need to look at our trade, and we need to be encouraging manufacturing to be set up in our own hemisphere. We need to be moving pharmaceuticals out of China so that we're not dependent upon them for business. That means we need to encourage the establishment of manufacturing. But again, we have to communicate that our top priorities when it comes to foreign policy is this fundamental right of religious freedom. And that needs to be communicated, and that puts the rest of the world on notice. And it gives encouragement to these other countries that, quite frankly, want religious freedom.
Yeah. All right, Tony Perkins of the Family Research Council. Thank you, Tony.
Good to be with you.
Thanks, Tony. Well, a major crackdown.
You see how a primary can be illegal and lead to 10 years of sentencing. So, of course, it will silence more people.
A major crackdown in Hong Kong today. A court sentenced dozens of pro-democracy leaders up to 10 years in prison. More than 45 activists and former politicians were prosecuted for their roles in an unofficial 2020 primary election. The judges accused them of attempting to undermine the government's authority under a national security law critics say was designed to crush dissent in the Chinese-controlled territory.
Coming up, the Trump transition shaking up Washington, from cabinet picks to mass deportation plans. We have the latest when Faith Nation returns.
Welcome back. Tough questions for the head of the FEMA department, or agency rather, today on Capitol Hill. Lawmakers grilled the agency over how it responded to Hurricanes Milton and Helene after reports of an employee instructing relief workers to avoid Florida homes that displayed Trump yard signs. FEMA Administrator Deanne Criswell confirmed the incident, noting the worker in question was fired.
This type of behavior and action will not be tolerated at FEMA, and we will hold people accountable if they violate our standards of conduct. I do not believe that this employee's actions are indicative of any widespread cultural problems at FEMA.
The agency called for an independent investigation into the incident and says a different team has been sent to the homes that were skipped.
Donald Trump is forging ahead with his transition back to the White House. The president-elect choosing Wall Street titan Howard Lutnick as his nominee for Commerce Secretary and Dr. Mehmet Oz as the administrator of the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. Trump is also standing by Matt Gaetz for Attorney General, even as he faces allegations of drug use and sexual misconduct.
The attorney for two of his accusers is now speaking out, saying they told the U.S. House Ethics Committee that Gaetz paid them for sex in 2019 when he was a member of Congress. The lawyer also said one of the women testified she saw Gaetz having sex with a minor, a 17-year-old friend, at a party in 2017. Gaetz denies all wrongdoing and notes that the DOJ closed its investigation without bringing any charges. The House Ethics Committee will meet Wednesday to decide whether to release the report.
It would be in everybody's best interest, including the president's, not to be surprised by some information that might come out during the confirmation hearing and the background check.
Mr. Trump also tapped his personal attorneys, Todd Blanche and Emil Bove, to serve in the DOJ. They represented Trump in the hush money case that ended with 34 felony convictions. Today, the Manhattan District Attorney agreed to postpone sentencing in that case after Trump's election win.
The president-elect is confirming plans to use the military to carry out his campaign promise of mass deportations. Responding to a post on Truth Social about reports the incoming Trump administration was prepared to declare a national emergency and use military assets to remove illegal immigrants from the United States, Trump posted one word: true. Reverend Samuel Rodriguez joins us now. He is the pastor of New Season Church and president of the National Hispanic Christian Leadership Conference. Reverend, welcome. So you've said in the past the best way for Christians to respond to the immigration and border crisis is through a biblical lens of compassion and rule of law. Your thoughts, Reverend, on this announcement about using the military to deport illegal immigrants?
Right. Using the military is not my preferable choice. I am in favor of deporting those that are involved in nefarious activities, primarily those that have come in the past 3.5 years that are just jeopardizing communities, primarily communities of color throughout America. So I am in favor. I like what Tom Homan, the incoming border czar, has stated on multiple occasions. They are making a priority? Criminals, the rapists, the drug dealers, the gang members. That's who they're going after. They're not targeting families that have been here for 25, 20, 15 years. That has been repeated on multiple occasions. So not my preferable choice to use the military. I think we need to expand the bandwidth of our Customs Border Patrol and ICE agents, indeed. And they were, of course, undermined by the current administration. But listen, I do believe we do have a crisis. Over 15 million people coming here illegally. And today, as we speak, in Congress, a hearing about over 300,000 children that this administration, the current administration, completely lost. So we do have a crisis. I do agree with President-elect Trump. There is a crisis. And I think we need to address this as urgently as possible.
Reverend Rodriguez, we hear you reiterating the administration claim that they're going to be targeting convicted felons. But what do you say to immigrants who are terrified that they'll be deported or their families will be torn apart? We've already seen a lot of reporting out there that there are some families or some family members who are already self-deporting.
Yeah, the self-deporting is something actually I recommended about 2 years ago. And it's not a bad idea for those that have recently come in. I just want to speak to those that have been in the country for 15, 20, 25 years, who are God-fearing, hardworking, not living of government subsidies, whose kids were born here. I have received assurances that the incoming administration will not be targeting these families. As a matter of fact, I worked with President Trump. I was a liaison between the White House and Speaker Nancy Pelosi at the time, negotiating a deal for Dreamers in exchange for the wall. And that's been thoroughly documented. So I know that President Trump is not in favor of deporting families that have been here for 20, 25 years. But the mucho malo hombres that have come in the past 3.5, 4 years, they must be deported. For crying out loud. We're talking about Venezuelan prisons that have been emptied out and just shipped to America, sent to America. So I agree with the sense of urgency. At the same time, I think we need to produce a bit of information that'll calm the anxiety in the immigrant community, those that have been here for a prolonged amount of time.
Yeah. Reverend, I want to ask you about some of Trump's cabinet nominations. We're seeing a little bit of a split among evangelicals, with some leaders publicly denouncing some of Trump's picks, namely Matt Gaetz over his alleged misconduct with a minor, and then RFK Jr. for his pro-abortion stance. What do you make of these two nominations specifically?
Yeah, no, I agree with RFK about the health of the nation and addressing the issues of processed foods and additives and so forth, and creating a healthier nation. I do not agree with Robert Kennedy Jr. regarding abortion. And I think there's a conversation that needs to be had with the evangelical community and the incoming administration. As you well know, that evangelical community came out strong, even stronger than 2020 or 2016, and helped take President Trump over the top in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, North Carolina, Georgia, Nevada, and Arizona. So that conversation needs to be had, and our voice should not be ignored. And the Matt Gaetz likewise, it's not Sam Rodriguez's preferable choice. However, the president has an agenda, and he wants to do away with the corruptive elements of lawfare. So we're giving him the benefit of the doubt, but I think we need to have a conversation between the transition team and the evangelical community on these nominations.
All right, that's going to have to be the final word. The Reverend Samuel Rodriguez, with pastor of the New Season Church. Thank you so much for being with us this evening. Up next, healing invisible injuries, the daunting work of chaplains in war-torn Ukraine. Returning to today's top story of the war in Ukraine. Since Russia's military invasion, hard to believe, nearly 3 years ago, many of the injured carried both physical and unseen wounds, taking a toll on their emotional well-being.
Ukrainian chaplains offer spiritual healing to those hurting. CBN contributor Chuck Holton reports on the growing demand for these caregivers for the soul.
This Ukrainian medic's GoPro camera video reveals the war's chaos. An artillery shell explodes near his car, wounding him before he can ensure his patient's safety. Despite his injuries, he persists in his mission of caring for comrades, highlighting these heroes' crucial role. Once the wounded arrive at the aid station, Army chaplains immediately comfort and pray for them.
We call them hospitaliers. They only work in hospitals, intensive care units, amputees, psychiatric clinics. And also there's narco clinics that we work with, and lots of soldiers do get addicted because of the stress PTSD that they face, and they cannot cope with it, so we need to work with them. They're struggling. Lots of them lost their families.
While medics can treat the physical injuries, emotional trauma persists. With a shortage of medics, chaplains often take on the responsibility, providing aid and healing to both soldiers and civilians. Many chaplains maintain strong personal connections to the area, which can intensify their challenges.
Lots of them have their families in occupied territory. At this moment, they cannot do anything to it. So we have problems. The chaplains I work with, they go front lines. We go all the way across the front line. In my team, we've got 2 women, both of us mothers of 5.
Christian Hickey, an American Green Beret and ex-police officer, relocated to Ukraine last year, committed to helping these chaplains.
Chaplaincy is not something that's been around at all in Ukraine. It was just officially established in 2022 after the war started. It had unofficially started in 2014. But now I sit on a board where I can actually have direct insight and give great advice on how the chaplaincy corps should work and help train those chaplains so they can go out and help soldiers who are seeking answers, who are looking for something, and this revealed Christ to them right there in the trenches.
Chaplains recognize the critical nature of their mission.
If a soldier is conscious, then we talk to them. We hold their hands. We try to take their attention away from their wounds. Medics like us because they like to work with chaplains because we stabilize them.
This mission is so important. It's the person on the ground, Russian or Ukrainian, who are fighting each other, who are dying, and who are needing some sort of help. We want to stand in solidarity, say, hey, we love you, we're here to support you, and to give them something that's everlasting. It's not something that's internal, not something that's going to go away after we leave.
What we want to do is we want to preach the pure gospel, just like pray to them, lead them to Jesus, take their hands, and like literally pray and they accept Jesus Christ in their hearts.
The wartime horrors can affect the chaplains as deeply as the soldiers. Katerina reflects on her emotions just after hearing of a friend's death.
If you ask me to describe what war is, I'd probably use one word to describe it. It's just a waste. It's just a waste of money, resources, waste of lives, waste of where sometimes we run out of strength. There's just a waste of a whole country, and it's absolutely pointless. Absolutely pointless. At the end, nobody wins.
Chuck Holton, CBN News, Ukraine.
Ahead, a special treat for pets awaiting their forever home. Next on Faith Nation.
Finally tonight, a labor of love is bringing harmony to pets awaiting adoption.
That's right. A 9th grader from New York instituted a new program at one of the oldest animal shelters in the country. At least once a week, 14-year-old Zen Micheline Hung brings her keyboard to play music for the dogs and cats at Bide-A-Wee Animal Rescue. She's been playing since she was 3 years old. And when her family moved in down the street, she had the idea to share her gift with animals to help them relax. And I bet it helps.
I stay with them and I play piano for them, so I think it soothes them.
And Zen performs at Carnegie Hall, but also plays for her dog, Cosmic, at home. And I bet it calms a lot of nerves for those
I wouldn't doubt
animals.
It. Also, a little bit of a captive audience. Did you hear some of those dogs barking while you sing
loved
along?
It. They loved it.
Well, thanks so much for watching.
Have a great night. That's really sweet.